Hello, everyone. I am Miles Taylor. Welcome to Defiance Daily Dispatches for the Defiant. Today's a special episode. This is our last normal episode of 2025. Now, let me caveat that with Monday, we have a mission briefing scheduled. That'll be our last mission briefing of the year. We're going to talk about our special holiday mission next week. But this is the last daily episode of the year. And so we wanted to do something a little bit special today. So what we're going to be talking about today is not the doom and gloom in the news, is not all of the abuses of power we have yet to hold the Trump administration accountable on. Today we are celebrating. So I hope you stick with us for today's program to talk about the 5 biggest defiance wins of 2025. Now, there are others, and I encourage you, if you are watching this in the chat, to post other links and videos and examples this year of defiance. And if you're just joining us for the first time, as in you have no idea what defiance.org is, we are a club for courageous Americans highlighting efforts to fight back against abuses of power. So that's what I want you posting in the chat. Give me your favorite examples this year of people pushing back against the abuses of power we have seen in the second Trump administration. Give me examples that inspired you. Give me examples that should inspire all of us going into 2026. And we're going to do the same for you today. We're going to give you our top 5 defiance wins of 2025. And to do that, I'm going to bring in my co-founder and friend, Xander Schultz. Xander, I'm excited about today.
Yeah, I'm excited about that intro. That was a better intro than you gave me on Wednesday.
Yeah, I think on Wednesday was like, here comes Xander Schultz to destroy the live stream, to kill our numbers, to make people totally disinterested in what we're doing. And you did, because people hate you.
Yeah, I did fulfill that prophecy. No, it's nice to be here. It's good to see your face. We're all finding ourselves in like different corners of family members' houses today. So production.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. And as viewers, you probably are too. You're probably posted up in some place down the street, across town, across the country, with a family member or friend, or you're packing while you're listening to us.
Yeah.
But
happy holidays, everyone.
I think today is going to be our most important episode of the year, because these wins are not just moments from this year; they are indicators of a broader trend, which, to me, is the name of this organization, Defiance. I think if I was going to give a theme to this year 6 months ago, I would have said it's the degradation of democracy. And now that we're at the end of the year, I would say the theme is defiance. People are sick of what they're seeing, whether they're Democrats or Republicans or independents. They're getting frustrated. Hell, the fact that Marjorie Taylor Greene joined the Defiance this year should tell you something. Doesn't mean that we're out of the woods yet, but it means things are really happening.
Yeah, we're governed by consent, but withdrawing that consent takes collective action. You can't do it one at a time when you have an authoritarian government that's trying to strike down dissent. And it's a muscle America hasn't had to use, really, right, in a long time. So it makes sense that we had to fire up the engines, and this effort is part of that. There's lots of other great efforts, on the local level and national level happening across the country. But it took a second for us to, start getting organized as a collective out here. And it's great to see it happening. I think the traction we've already had with our awesome members is proof that there's an understanding that we need it. And, I think at the beginning of the year, you and I talked about this. There was a lot of pundits that were saying, Americans, you need to wake up. And we thought that was a misdiagnosis. Like, Americans were awake. Everyone's staring at this. It was scary. What to do next was really challenging, and how to disrupt this type of effort was challenging to understand. And I think you're totally right. Like, we were talking before the show, we're not in the gulags. We're not in El Salvador. This hasn't descended into, the worst case scenario yet. It doesn't mean we're out of the woods, but
I mean, real talk. Xander said before we hopped on, when we were in the green room, he said, Miles, the fact that you're not in prison yet should be a good indicator for everyone else that the defiance is working. The operative word being yet, and we say that half facetiously because that's how scary the environment is. But people are People are standing up, and the act of standing up makes you safer. You know, every day I get the question from people in our audience and everywhere, every day, you know, should I even be liking posts that are critical of Trump? Does that put me on a watch list? Well, you know what? That's a self-fulfilling prophecy, because if you are afraid, it makes other people more afraid. And yeah, it makes it riskier for everyone else. The less afraid we all are, the harder it is to single anyone out. And that's why speaking out doesn't just make you safer, it makes everyone else safer. So that takes us, Andrew. Let's hit our first win of the day, because we're going to go down from 5 to 1. The very first one we put in here was broadly, the category is media defiance, because this year we saw members of the media, either individual journalists or prominent comedians, facing off against Donald Trump's abuses of power, and doing so defiantly. So defiantly that they set an example for a lot of Americans. And this was not a foregone conclusion, because remember, folks, before we go to this first one, we started off this year with Donald Trump threatening media organizations, threatening to revoke their broadcast licenses, suing almost every major media outlet in the country. We're still seeing that. He just sued BBC across the pond for $10 billion, doing everything he could to intimidate media organizations that were critical of them. And you know what? History is not certain on this, in this respect, because there are some countries where an autocratic leader threatens the media and totally dismantles major media outlets. We're seeing that happen in Hungary. But instead, here in the United States, we saw pushback. And the best example of that, I think, all of this year is what happened with Jimmy Kimmel. Jimmy Kimmel this year has been relentless in joking about and criticizing Donald Trump and his abuses of power. Because of that, what happened? Donald Trump and the chair of his FCC threatened to remove Jimmy Kimmel from the air. And in a moment of fear and capitulation, ABC and its parent organization, Disney, did exactly that. They pulled Jimmy Kimmel off the air. Well, this is not a story about how bad things happened this year. This is a story about how defiance happened this year. And because of many of you, and because of the courage of people like Jimmy Kimmel and his colleague, Stephen Colbert, who were also targeted, and the other comedians who stood with him, and the folks that rised up, he was put back on the air. And this, to me, was one of the breakthrough cultural moments of defiance this year. It showed that the president of the United States was going to try to take down big people as a symbol of his power. And instead, we turned that into a symbol of defiance. And I've got to say, since that moment, you know that Donald Trump has been smarting about this. You know that he is so self-aware that that symbol of his power was turned into a symbol of defiance, that he's bringing up Jimmy Kimmel all the time. Listen to this clip of Kimmel talking about how obsessed Donald Trump has become with him since then.
The president once again made time to mention his favorite moron, me.
He's doing really well. Totally dominates the late night. Totally dominates. So I guess there's morons that they have at the end. Kimmel, what bad people?
Thank you. You know, Donald, you mentioned me. Over the last 4 days, you mentioned me 3 times now in 4 days. I just want you to know, I'm thinking about you too, girl.
I love that because, look, when you get attacked by the president of the United States, including Jimmy Kimmel, and he basically admitted to this, people around you say, you know what, maybe you should lay low. Maybe you shouldn't punch back because it could get worse for you. And that could have been the case with Jimmy Kimmel, but he knew something. He knew that if he went silent, if he stopped punching back against Donald Trump, that would be capitulation. And so he's kept at it. He's kept using comedy as a means to underscore what's happening in this country. And for that, we applaud him. For that, he is one of the key elements of media defiance being a win of this year. But there's another one, a slightly more serious one, which was in this category, the Pentagon tried to shut down major media outlets this year from covering what's happening inside the Department of Defense. And if you weren't following this this year, this is, I think, an all-time story in terms of attacks on the First Amendment. And remember, the only constitutionally protected profession in this country is the press, the free press. The First Amendment of the Constitution protects that profession. And this year, the Department of Defense, amidst controversial policies like lethal boat strikes in the Caribbean and the deployment of American troops into U.S. cities, decided that they were going to tell every major media outlet in this country that to continue to report on the Pentagon from the Pentagon, they had to sign a loyalty pledge to that building, that they wouldn't report things that the Defense Department didn't want them to. I could go on for days about how un-American this is, but you know what? I don't need to, because instead of signing that pledge, every major media outlet in this country decided they would rather walk out of the building.
In an act of defiance, journalists walked out of the Pentagon for good and by the dozens. Some had covered the U.S. military for decades from inside the building, but said Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth had gone too far by trying to force them to sign on to new restrictions they said violated the freedom of the press. Hegseth maintains the new rules are common sense.
So you can't just roam anywhere you want. It used to be, Mr. President, the press could go anywhere, pretty much anywhere in the Pentagon. The most classified area in the world.
While it is untrue that reporters could roam wherever they wanted in the Pentagon, the new rules further limit the media's access to the building and how they interact with staff, including how reporters solicit information from sources. The rules also restrict what the media can report, including some kinds of unclassified information.
I want to bring Xander back into the conversation here. Xander, I think that the media defiance is important, not just because, we get to see the examples of folks on TV standing up to this pressure, but because we are dependent on a free press. And if the free press gets neutered by this administration, then we have fewer ways to hold them accountable, to know what's actually happening. And I've been amazed that ever since that walkout at the Pentagon, we have seen some of the biggest bombshell news reports about what's happening at DoD, which shows that this effort to intimidate the press, it failed.
Also, the value of whistleblowers. There's a reason we've highlighted whistleblowing efforts 2 of our 7 weeks thus far, and they are attacking the free press, and we need information to flow out of these folks for sure. Yeah, it's interesting. The First Amendment was like a very treacherous territory for Trump to go after so early in this effort, because Republicans have been, fighting for the First Amendment. A lot of the Republicans that have aligned themselves with Trump have been fighting for the First Amendment for a long time. And you saw it was some of the earliest fractures from Trump and his political party, this Kimmel attack. It was also a really wonderful example of early collective action. A big part of Kimmel coming back on the air and Disney standing up a little bit was how many people unsubscribed from Disney suddenly. They lost billions of dollars overnight. And I think it was the beginning. We talked about Americans needing to build that muscle. It was the beginning of Americans starting to build that, when we move together, we can actually fight back muscle. And it was really inspiring to see.
Yeah, I agree with you there. I would also add into this category, we didn't talk about it just now, but, new media has been absolutely crucial in this moment, because there has been the nimbleness and the lack of corporate pressure that has allowed folks, including on platforms like Substack, to be able to go cover stories that might otherwise not get out, or not get out in a timely manner. I mean, I'll give you an example of that. We've referenced him a number of times in Defiance, but Ken Klippenstein is a journalist who does almost all of his work on Substack. And I think Ken has broken one of the most important stories of the year and continued to cover it via Substack. And that's the story of the administration's issuance of an executive order in September, NSPM 7, which is basically this domestic terrorism directive to start to designate the political opposition in the United States as terrorist organizations. We haven't even seen this fully play out. We're in the earliest innings of this story, but Americans know about that story because of the work Ken has done on it. I mean, I noted just earlier this week, the Washington Post was like 2 weeks late in reporting about a thing that Ken was bringing to the public for via new media. And so that's been another place where we've seen defiance, is a lot of journalists who've left these major media organizations have said, no, I'm not going to stop reporting. I'm going to go do reporting more independently and make sure that the American people know what's really happening. That's been very cool to see.
I mean, Substack deserves its own shout out because
No, we're not
at the
paid to
beginning
say
of
that.
this year,
I wish we got a big donation to the organization for saying that, but it's true.
yeah. I mean, at the beginning of this year, we were all fretting about Elon Musk's takeover of Twitter. We actually lost some of those new media platforms, or at least we lost the control of the algorithms, or the feeling that there are good actors, or at least moral actors that didn't want to see those platforms become so biased and wanted them to be true town squares. So we even lost new media infrastructure at the top of the year. I mean, it continues to happen with Ellison and TikTok. And so places like Substack have really been important in this moment. I'm happy you shouted it out.
Yeah. Well, let's jump to number 4, Xander, because number 4 of the year is surprisingly what we would call congressional defiance. Yeah. And this may seem counterintuitive because hadn't been a whole lot of courage in general in Congress amidst the return of Donald Trump, but there have been cracks in the edifice of the MAGA movement from that very unexpected place this year, and on 2 major issues, on healthcare and on the Epstein files. And we'll get to the Epstein files in a moment. But first, on healthcare, take a listen to this latest story, because you may have missed this in the past couple of days, that there has been congressional defiance of the Trump administration's efforts to keep Americans from getting their healthcare subsidies re-upped.
Breaking news at this hour in defiance of Republican House Speaker Mike Johnson. 4 Republicans signed on to a Democrat petition to force a vote on extending Affordable Care Act tax credits set to expire January 1. Check your watch, everybody. That's very soon. Once that happens, that expiration, without a deal in Congress, healthcare premiums for millions of Americans are expected to do this, go way up. Last night, a House committee moved to vote on a GOP healthcare plan that excluded those Affordable Care Act credits. Well, today's move likely sets up a vote on an ACA extension, at least kicking the can down the road to early January. One of those defying House Speaker Mike Johnson is New York Republican Mike Lawler. Here's what he had to say on the takeout last night on GOP efforts to stop the extension vote.
It's idiotic and it's political malpractice. To me, this is the height of absurdity. It is precisely why things don't get done in this place, because people would rather the upper hand or the issue or the political win rather than the hard work of bipartisan compromise.
Idiotic and political malpractice, words that at the start of this year you would not have expected to hear from within Donald Trump's caucus about his own leadership team in Congress. But you are, and it's not from all Republican members or even the majority of Republican members, but the fact that there are a handful of Republican members now feeling emboldened enough to defy this administration, to defy the MAGA House leadership, tells you that something is happening in this country. Now, we also saw that very significantly in a story that's still playing out today, which is on the Epstein files. Now, as CBS reported back in November, all House Democrats and 4 Republicans have added their names to a discharge petition in Congress. Besides Thomas Massie, GOP Representatives Marjorie Taylor Greene of Georgia, Nancy Mace of South Carolina, and Lauren Boebert of Colorado have signed on. 2 special elections in Virginia and Arizona in September provided the final 2 signatures from Democrats to reach the 218 threshold. So let me remind folks about how this all came to pass. Is, of course, the Donald J. Trump administration was refusing to release the files that it had promised for years it was going to come back into power to release. Now, this ballooned this summer into a massive controversy because of a number of reports from different media outlets about how Trump's name was in the Epstein files. And this became one of the biggest cover-ups in American history, and it's still playing out. Now, at the time this summer, I think a lot of people felt like Donald Trump's caucus in Congress, the Republicans, the MAGA Republicans, were going to stick with him. And if he didn't want to release those files, they would not do anything about it. But that's not what happened. One after the other in Congress, in the MAGA caucus, started saying, we can't do this. We have to push back. And that resulted in this discharge petition forcing House Republican leaders to bring up a vote to release those files. And that forced the administration's hand. Donald Trump and the White House went from vehemently opposing it to being forced into a position of reluctantly accepting that the files be released. Now, the jury's still out on whether the administration is going to release all of those files. Today, they've released a batch, but as a lot of you know, there's controversy because it seems like all the files haven't been released and people are digging through them right now. So we'll see what happens there. But the big story is Congress pushing back, probably on the number one issue this year that Donald Trump did not want them to push back on. Xander, I want to bring you back into the conversation on this one and get your take. I mean, just those two episodes, healthcare and the Epstein files, give me some encouragement. Again, we're not talking about dozens and dozens of Republican members pushing back, but look, majorities are thin enough in Congress that just a handful of members deciding to be brave can make a really big difference.
Exactly. I'm so happy you mentioned that. We don't need dozens. The margins are razor thin in both houses. I'll be frank. The Epstein files thing is not something I spend a lot of time thinking about. I think Donald Trump has already proven he's a pedophile in a million different ways. The guy started Miss Teen USA. That's a weird move. My friends would tell me probably not to pursue that path if I brought up that idea. So that part has been kind of settled in my mind for a while. I don't think there's anything unique that's going to be unveiled that'll change how I feel about the guy. But what is helpful is as these coalitions are built around these issues, those members that are sticking their neck out against him, especially on the Republican side, they might get ostracized. And if they're ostracized, like Marjorie Taylor Greene was, sometimes you just dig in then. You're like, all right, well, if I'm out, then I'm going to be part of the resistance. And like we mentioned, we don't need that many people in that posture to start winning on a number of issues and having Congress be a real check.
Yeah. Look, right there with you. I mean, and look, I mean, I'll say, because you're obligated to say it from a legal standpoint. We haven't seen anything in the Epstein files yet that proves that Donald Trump is a pedophile or engaged in illegal activity. But to the point that Xander just made, everything about Donald Trump's conduct towards women, towards younger women, has been repulsive to watch. And you could push out everything you know about the Epstein files from your brain and just watch a supercut of the way Donald Trump treated his own teenage daughter to be disgusted by his behavior. Okay? So it's clear why he has been trying to cover up this association with Jeffrey Epstein. Criminal conduct or no criminal conduct, the man has very clearly engaged in absolutely reprehensible, unethical behavior, including his association with the most infamous pedophile in at least modern history, Jeffrey Epstein. So, I think it's remarkable, Xander. It's actually remarkable that we even saw the members of Congress we did stand up and demand this. And, some of those names on that list, Nancy Mace, Marjorie Taylor Greene, Lauren Boebert, these are people who were like the biggest Donald Trump MAGA ride or dies. I mean, I certainly would have expected, we just heard from Mike Lawler earlier on healthcare. Mike Lawler is a moderate Republican from New York. I get that Mike Lawler has the stones to stand up to Donald Trump because his reelection deeply depends on him not being seen as a total far-right partisan. But these other folks, Marjorie Taylor Greene and Lauren Boebert, Nancy Mace, like these people eat MAGA for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. I would not have expected, it was not on my bingo card at the start of this year, that they would step up and do this. That's not me saying I embrace everything these folks do for. There's a zillion things I oppose them on, but damn it, we've got to laud people who have the courage to break with this man, and those people did.
Yeah, Robert McNamara has a great quote about the need to know your enemy and how many mistakes you make in the fog of war if you don't actually know your enemy. And good example, it's easy to write Boebert and Marjorie Taylor Greene off as someone who's going to be ride or die with Trump. But you've got to understand what their narratives are, right? QAnon, which a lot of us and other rational people are not that familiar with this mythology, but at the center of it is Trump as a savior breaking up a pedophile ring run by elites, right? Like that is the center of
elites
this story.
Who drink the blood of children and have kidnapped them and have them in the basement. I mean, it's crazy.
Don't take a left turn too far down that rabbit hole that in Scientology I don't recommend. But if you know that and you know these people believe that, you could see how they would feel deeply betrayed that when that person assumes power, they fight tooth and nail to not release the Epstein files.
Yeah. Yeah. There are going to be movies and books and so many things written about this moment. But one of the parts of the story that's going to be told is that the most damaging pushback came from the inside. And I think we've seen that again and again when it comes to Donald Trump's abuses of power, which I always say it that way because we don't exist as defiance.org or as a movement to just push back against anything Donald Trump wants. Look, conservatives and Republicans can go implement their agenda and people can be opposed to it. And same thing with liberals. We are talking about a man who exists in a way that is offensive to the U.S. Constitution, whose every action seems to be in offense to that document. And that's what we're pushing back against. But the most damaging things we have seen to his efforts to defy the Constitution and the law have been insiders or people you least expected, the people inside the tribe pushing back against Donald Trump. That's had a huge impact, and it certainly has this year. And so that's why congressional defiance is number 4. But let's go to number 3, because there's a whole nother category here that we are going to call persecution defiance. Now, what do we mean by that? Well, we mean things like I've experienced this year. President coming after people personally, individually, selectively, and vindictively to try to destroy them. And oftentimes when that happens, when Donald Trump pursues people individually, tries to isolate them, it works. I always give Alexander Vindman credit for saying this, but Vindman once said to me years ago when we were having this conversation, hey, Miles, you know what? Intimidation works. And that's why autocrats do it. That's why wannabe dictators like Donald Trump do it. They know that threats scare people. And when you scare people, you have a force multiplier effect with censorship. That way you don't have to censor every American individually. You just have to make an example out of a handful of Americans. And if they shut up like you hope they will, that'll scare the rest of them into compliance. Now, like I said, I know this personally after the president's executive order in April when he accused me of treason, a crime punishable by death. What happened that week? His aides told media outlets that they had done it not because they found any evidence that I'm guilty of treason, but you guessed it, to send a message, to make an example out of me. They admitted that to the media. It was to make an example. Now, as a lot of you know, me and my family faced a choice. Do we want to be made an example out of? Or do we want to fight back, knowing that it might increase the risks to us? And we chose the latter. And I've got to say this year, I wasn't sure how big that boat was going to get. I wasn't sure whether there were going to be other people who caved and capitulated or fought back. And I have been not just pleasantly surprised, but so completely inspired to see major figures who got attacked by this president, and attacked lawlessly, I might add, attacked in ways that so clearly show abuses of power to punish political enemies, and who decided that despite that, they would fight. Now, I'm going to give you an example of that. Mark Kelly and 6 Democratic lawmakers who made this video.
I'm Senator Alyssa Slotkin.
Senator Mark Kelly.
Representative Chris Deluzio.
Congresswoman Maggie Goodlander.
Representative Chrissy Houlihan.
Congressman Jason Crow. I was a captain in the United States Navy.
Former CIA officer.
Former Navy.
Former paratrooper and Army Ranger.
Former intelligence officer.
Former Air Force.
We want to speak directly to members of the military
and the intelligence community
who take risks each day
to keep Americans safe.
We know you are under enormous stress and pressure right now.
Americans trust their military.
But that trust is at risk.
This administration is pitting our uniformed military
and intelligence community professionals
against American citizens. Like us, you all swore an oath
to protect and defend this Constitution.
And right now, the threats to our Constitution aren't just coming from abroad,
but from right here at home. Our laws are clear. You can refuse illegal orders.
You can refuse illegal orders.
You must refuse illegal orders.
No one has to carry out orders that violate the law
or our Constitution.
We know this is hard and that it's a difficult time to be a public servant.
But whether you're serving in the CIA,
the Army,
or Navy,
the Air Force,
your vigilance is critical.
And know that we have your back.
Because now, more than ever,
the American people need you.
We need you to stand up for our laws,
our Constitution,
and who we are as Americans. Don't give up.
Don't give up.
Don't give up.
Don't give up the ship.
Now, that video in and of itself was an act of defiance. I mean, that was, 6 Democratic lawmakers effectively saying, we know that the Trump administration is engaged in a blizzard of illegality, and you might be on the receiving end of illegal orders. And here's what your rights and responsibilities are. That was defiant in and of itself and worthy of being on this list for what they did. But then what came next further validated that these lawmakers were defiant, because Donald Trump said this. He wrote on Truth Social, "This is really bad and dangerous to our country. Their words cannot be allowed to stand." And then, of course, in all caps, "seditious behavior from traitors. Lock them up?" ? And he continued on social media to post about how this was sedition, that it was, quote, punishable by death. He said George Washington would hang them for doing this. And of course, the White House has since gone on to launch an official FBI investigation into those lawmakers, to launch a, quote, command investigation to U.S. Senator Mark Kelly, who served in the military, potentially to recall him into service so that he can go through court-martial proceedings. Donald Trump has gone from 0 to 60 on threatening these lawmakers because of that video. And what have they done in the face of that persecution? They've continued to speak. In fact, if you look today on social media, you will see U.S. Senator Mark Kelly continuing to talk about how they are going to have the backs of U.S. troops, continuing to talk about how they are going to defy Donald Trump's efforts to investigate and persecute them. That's one of the reasons they are on this list. But there's one more that I want to point out before bringing Xander back into the conversation. And that is someone who has been in Donald Trump's crosshairs for years and years and years. And he did not miss the opportunity, Donald Trump, in his first year back in office, to go after this person. And that's former FBI Director James Comey, who this year, Donald Trump was racing against the clock to try to prosecute. Now, taking you back in time, the administration realized there might be some loopholes in which they could try to bring a case against James Comey. And Donald Trump demanded that his attorney general find something, anything, to make that happen. And when they found that sliver of information that they felt like they might be able to bring a sham case on, they even replaced a prosecutor in a key office with a White House loyalist who'd never prosecuted cases just to try to make it happen. Now, you could expect that after this, that anyone, even a former FBI director who's indicted by the U.S. federal government, might sit back, not say anything, choose their words, lawyer up out of fear. But what James Comey did this year was not show fear. He showed defiance. And I want to play for you his response that he issued just after he had been indicted by this administration.
I'm grateful that the court ended the case against me, which was a prosecution based on malevolence and incompetence, and a reflection of what the Department of Justice has become under Donald Trump, which is heartbreaking. But I was also inspired by the example of the career people who refused to be part of this travesty. It cost some of them their jobs, which is painful, but it preserved their integrity, which is beyond price. And I know they will serve again. I was very lucky that some of the best lawyers in America stepped forward to represent me. I hope they serve as an example to more and more lawyers, especially at some of the big firms, to participate in protecting our liberty, protecting the rule of law. This case mattered to me personally, obviously, but it matters most because a message has to be sent that the President of the United States cannot use the Department of Justice to target his political enemies. I don't care what your politics are, you have to see that as fundamentally un-American and a threat to the rule of law that keeps all of us free.
That, of course, was James Comey's response after the charges against him were dismissed. But also, if you remember, when Comey was indicted by this administration, he posted another video where he said, "I am not afraid, and you shouldn't be either. Let's have a trial." He showed that he was ready to stand up and that the truth would prevail, and it did prevail. I want to bring Xander back into the conversation here. These are important, my friend, because these are huge examples for the American people. I mean, like we just said earlier, we get questions every day from folks who say, I don't even know if I should like social media posts that are critical of Trump because I'm scared I might get attacked. When people like Mark Kelly and James Comey stand up and say, no, we're going to fight back, it does give other people the courage to do the same thing. You're muted. A classic. We're gonna get you a shirt that says "Unmute me."
I'll get through one episode someday soon. I promise. Just not today. Yeah, of course. When someone's personally targeted and they are saying, I mean, Comey's line is pretty badass. Like, let's have a trial. And it shows not only I'm not afraid, but I also have faith in our institutions, which are very easy to doubt right now, that the right outcome will take place. And that's exactly what happened too. So it's a virtuous cycle of people standing up, targeted people, letting the Constitution, letting the courts defend them, and then winning. It is a virtuous cycle. And as we mentioned earlier, there's safety in numbers. I don't know what Trump's talking about with Washington hanging a bunch of people. I think he's got his revolutions mixed up. I think he's thinking about the French and Robespierre. I don't know exactly where he's going with that.
He has a persecution fetish, and I think he's rewritten history because of that. But look, I will also add, Xander, because my family was so close to all this stuff early in the year, we have been spending a lot of time with a lot of the different top defense lawyers who have taken on these cases. And I'll share with you that, even some of those folks, leading defense lawyers in this country who were prepared for Donald Trump to come in and launch these revenge campaigns, even they were shocked first at the volume of revenge actions Trump, but they were also shocked at how many of their clients that they took on in the wake of those cases ended up being willing to fight back, because a lot of folks right after Donald Trump was inaugurated felt like, oh man, this guy is going to have 4 years of unchecked power to go punish people, and folks are going to be scared to fight it because it's the full weight of the federal government that comes against you. And the fact that people weren't, again, we could say it over and over, makes it that much easier for the next person and the next person to fight back, and they have, which has been great to see.
Yeah, this type of conquest doesn't work. Where there's no safe quarters, people will fight tooth and nail if they believe there's no alternative and they're fighting for their life. The Romans almost conquered the world because they would go build aqueducts and mostly improve the people's lives and take over from a terrible king. And so that type of expansion sometimes works if you are giving people a place to go and offering them into a new world. This type of revenge campaign where loyalty is the only metric on if you're good or bad. It's binary. You're loyal, you're good. You're disloyal, you deserve death. It just doesn't work. And we talked about safety a lot, like people feeling unsafe pushing back. There's this myth in every totalitarian push, which is the myth of safety by not pushing back in the beginning. It only gets worse. Our best chance at confronting this guy and winning is today. Our second best chance is tomorrow. The quicker we can organize and confront now, the better. There's not a lot of Germans who wish they weren't more active in 1936 when 1946 rolled around. Their country was destroyed and their families killed, etc. So today's the day to push back. Tomorrow's the second best day. Let's keep it rolling.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. I mean, look, and it's why you and I are devoting our every day to this. There are vastly safer things you and I could both be doing, but we had conversations this year about how, frankly, this is the moment both of us have prepared for our whole lives, is fighting back against something like this happening in our country. And we want to give other folks an opportunity to do that. And Defiance is just one of many organizations doing that. But our whole purpose is to expose people to other organizations and efforts they can get involved in by being members, to elevate those efforts, to amplify those efforts, and to make sure that we are growing the Defiance nationwide. Because the bigger it gets, it has sort of a positive self-fulfilling prophecy is if you join it, if you are unafraid, it allows for us to take down a wannabe autocrat. And I think that, as you noted, Xander, history gives us plenty of examples of how those revenge actions an autocrat takes are self-defeating. It makes people angry. It sort of creates the opposition. And we've seen that happen this year for sure.
100%. And shout out to you. I mean, look, I'll say this, to that point, this is the safest I've felt all year, is us building this with our early club members and growing.
Ironic, isn't it?
Ironic. A lot of people wouldn't have advised me, hey, the best, most safest thing for you to do is put your face next to Miles Taylor's face every day.
That's right.
but it's the best I've felt about our chances yet. And our early growth shows other people understand that as well. And so, let's just keep it going. Miles, you deserve, honestly, I know it's our show and it would be kind of weird for you to highlight yourself. None of the other people targeted started something called Defiance and are attempting to lead a mass movement against the president. So, brother, you are right up there in my book with Navalny and some of the other brave people who have looked, autocrats in the eyes and said, F you.
I'm grateful for you, my friend, because it's very real when you say, it was not a foregone conclusion to sit here on a side-by-side with me on the screen. I had very close friends. I had people who were groomsmen at my wedding distance themselves from me and say they really couldn't interact with me and my wife until all of this was over because they were scared about what it might mean for them. That's one tiny anecdote. I mean, there were dozens of anecdotes like that after the order happened. For us, which totally blew our minds. We did not expect that folks like that, close friends, would distance themselves from us out of fear. But that's what happens in a moment like this. That's what happens when you get singled out by the president, and multiply that by the thousands of people who've been targeted this year. And you find that the blast radius of this revenge campaign has been much bigger than just the immediate targets. So many people, so many lives, so many families affected. And so, Xander, when friends like you say, no, I'm going to do the opposite. I'm not going to run for the hills. I'm going to run towards you. That sends another signal. And that's also infectious. And so personally means a lot to me. But I also think people like you make courage contagious. And I could not be more grateful. And that actually is a good segue, Xander, into our second in the top 5 sort of acts of defiance of the year. And that second is what we would call crowdsourced defiance, because people around the country have started to realize courage is contagious. And that infection has spread. And nowhere has that been more obvious this year than in our number 2 category when it comes to the No King's Day protests. Take a listen.
Organizers say more than 7 million people gathered at nearly 3,000 events across the country over the weekend for No Kings rallies in a largely peaceful show of force against the Trump administration's policies. That's 2 million more people than the first No Kings Day back in June.
Now, I think I'm correct in saying that in October, the October 18th No King's Day protest was the largest single-day peaceful protest in American history. And you know this is significant when far-right media outlets start saying that the organizers and that the protests themselves were faked or paid for or photoshopped or AI or any of those things, you know that they're freaking out because they think the numbers are so big that they have to be fake. Well, I can tell you, I went to one of those protests. It wasn't fake. The people there weren't paid. It was very real. This was indeed a major, major moment in American history. And it shows that it's not just elites who are being targeted or major comedians who are being canceled from their networks that are standing up. Everyday Americans are feeling inspired and joining the defiance. And we also saw that this year with boycotts. American consumers took their wallets and said, I'm not going to give you this if you capitulate to this regime. Now, that happened with Disney, as we talked about earlier, and Jimmy Kimmel. It also happened with Tesla this year as people pushed back against the lawless actions of DOJ, the Department of Government Efficiency that started to unilaterally delete federal agencies, violating the law because they were destroying agencies that Congress had created without consulting Congress. People stuck it to Elon Musk and protested outside of Tesla dealerships and made the stock price, made the value of that company tank, put pressure on Elon Musk. That was remarkable. But we also saw that with Target, a company that started to roll back its diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives because of pressure from the White House. And what did consumers do? Consumers said, no, we don't want you to bow down to Donald Trump. We want you to stand up against Donald Trump. What did that result in? Well, the leader of that company, Target, is on the way to stepping down, I believe, at the end of this year from that company. And that's because of consumer pressure. That's because people said, we have had enough. Sandra, I want to bring you back into the conversation. This is the thing that we wanted to see this year. This is the thing we had hoped for. And I think this presages what 2026 will look like. I think next year will really be the year of defiance, the year we hit that mythical inflection point of 3.5% of the population getting personally involved. Yeah, no, you're still on mute. I'm definitely making you that t-shirt. Press this button to unmute me. And people can come up in the street.
I should start with this sticky on the screen. That'd be a good start. I don't know if we've ever said this like out loud, but one of the things we wanted to do through Defiance, we talk about being the Oprah of democracy where we're spreading money around. I think also one of the things we're trying to create here is being the NFL of defiance, where there's a weekly cadence to this thing. Because I think we all felt great marching, but there was also this feeling I had, at least afterwards, where I was like, okay, what now? Where do we go now? And, things that aren't a habit, we come and go from those activities. And so a big goal of ours, I think when we set out on why we do weekly meetings, other than it's fun, it's great to cut checks weekly, and it's great to meet new leaders weekly and whatnot, is to try to help Americans build a habit around resistance and collective action. The NFL, churches, other people have been very successful putting weekly tent poles down and building cultures. And so that was a thought. That was a thought there, because we saw, through the protests, through the boycotts, the energy that there is in America. But we wanted to add a culture to that energy and a habit to that energy.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I got to give all the credit in the world to the folks at Indivisible for what they have built. That's been remarkable. And you see that people are so hungry for more than just an occasional protest. And their organization has created these extraordinary chapters around the country. And that's in response to a demand signal from people to be able to do more. And that's why we say, when we launched this, the banner question on our website was and remains, what can I do? Because people are asking every week, what can I do to push back against this? And, we would like to, until this is all over, continue to give answers every single week to that question. And so proud of the folks who are part of this community who have responded to that call. Now that takes us to our final one. And our number one act of defiance this year is also kind of tied to crowdsource defiance, also kind of tied to persecution defiance, tied to a lot of the categories we mentioned earlier, but it's on one specific issue that I think has rallied Americans so clearly to say, this is not who we are. And that's what I would call ICE defiance. This year, the American people rose up and said, we don't want a secret police in this country. We don't want to treat our fellow Americans and neighbors this way. We don't want to be a fortified bunker in a mountain when we have been told that America is supposed to be a shining city on a hill. And this year, as Americans have watched ICE officers treat immigrants in this country inhumanely, treat U.S. citizens in this country inhumanely, they have said, we have had enough. I want to show you a supercut of what Americans have done this year in response to what ICE has done and to show that they are defying this new secret police.
Faces federal charges for allegedly throwing a sandwich at a Customs and Border Protection agent.
He thought it was funny. Well, he doesn't think it's funny today because we charged him with a felony.
Breaking news. Yes. DC sandwich guy.
Acquitted.
Acquitted.
Oh, stupid ass bitch. That's why you gotta hide your face. Shame! 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 Hey, I'm not doing this. Go! 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 Yes! Go! Yes! Watch out! Watch out!
It was chaos on Canal Street Tuesday night, shoving followed by screaming as dozens of federal agents targeting street vendors were confronted by droves of New Yorkers who formed a spontaneous protest.
You should be disgusted with yourself.
My name is Mubashir, and I never expected to be standing in front of all these cameras and microphones. But what happened to me cannot stay quiet.
The Minneapolis Police Department is committed to honoring the human dignity of every person in our community. The Minneapolis Police Department does not participate in immigration enforcement. We do not care and do not ask people about immigration status.
Neighbors are literally blowing the whistle on ICE and Border Patrol. More than 10,000 whistles have been handed out by volunteers in Belmont-Cragen. 17,000 total have been handed out since the beginning of the month.
I don't know if you can hear that, but I'm walking down my street right now. You hear all that whistling and that yelling? That's ICE abducting people in our neighborhood. This is what it's like in Chicago right now.
My school's hosting a Know Your Rights training, and I'm about to go brave the cold to walk over to campus because I feel like this is a really important event for me to go to.
If you encounter ICE, these are the things that every New Yorker should do.
Since this Border Patrol operation was announced, he says he's been researching what rights businesses have, just in case agents showed up.
I'm not gonna let them do what they think they can do because they can't. You know, there's laws that everyone has to obey by.
Bye-bye! Bye-bye!
Look, you know, Xander, as we come back in, I will say that it was not a foregone conclusion to me at the top of this year to become so deeply critical of immigration and customs enforcement. After all, I used to help oversee that agency, and I know that there are great people there who've done things to get sex, traffickers out of this country and, terrorists out of this country and, protect people against weapons of mass destruction. It's not just a deportation agency, but ICE has become something else entirely. And ICE is being used by this administration as a masked secret police. And it's not okay. And it's not okay. And the American people have seen this as a symbol of encroaching autocracy, and they are fighting back. Third time's a charm, man, but not for you.
I'm trying to be respectful on the house of it is loud. It doesn't help that they dress up like the bad guys. At least the Nazis dress nice. These guys look terrible and terrifying. They look exactly like the Orwellian role they're playing. It's great to see people standing up. It's infectious. It's fantastic. I was really happy to see the Minnesota police say something. I think police have this awesome opportunity that I didn't think they would have for the next 20 years in this country, which is to restore faith as protectors of their communities. And I'm sure the folks in Minneapolis feel different about their police, the day after that speech was given. And it'd be great to see not only the collective stand up like we're doing, but also the local institutions stand up in the ways they are.
Yeah, no, it's totally true. And now almost every day we are served up an example of how people are being oppressed by ICE, these abuses of power, but also how they're pushing back. I mean, one of those examples in that video was just last week, was a U.S. citizen in, up there in the Twin Cities that had been detained, dragged to a processing facility. And then once they realized he was an American, they said, oh, okay, well, we're going to kick you out into this blizzard and you can walk back in the snow. I mean, it is insane. And look,
After
the Secretary of Homeland, the administration and the Secretary are, they are full of it. They are lying every day about this because they keep saying, look, Americans are not being targeted. Power isn't being abused. We can see with our own eyes and ears every single day we are seeing videos of this. They are lying under oath to Congress about the extent of this. They are lying to the public about this. And the beauty of social media and new media has been we are exposing them and the American people are exposing them. And that's been very encouraging to see. But there is one symbol, Xander, that you didn't see in that video. And one symbol that I think has done more than any of these to expose the hypocrisy and the absurdity of the administration's claims that America is under siege from immigrants and under attack from domestic terrorists. And that symbol to push back against those bogus claims has been a little tiny creature that you would not have expected.
Begins with one. One frog who refuses to bend the knee, who dares to say, no kings, no crowns, not here, not ever. Because when the powerful forget the people, someone must remember what's right. And when one frog stands, others rise to join them. They come from the ponds and the alleyways, from the rivers and the rooftops, from the quiet corners where hope still breathes. One by one, they step forward. Each frog, a voice. Each voice, a promise. No kings, no rulers, no tyrants, just frogs. Awake, unafraid, and united. One frog can make a ripple, but together we can make waves. Frogs, together, strong.
I do have to say, first of all, hilarious video, but that to me really has been the symbol of the defiance is the frog 100%. Because of, as the administration was saying, there was war in Portland and we have to deploy the American military to go crack down on this city and Antifa has taken it over. You have this video of the ICE facility that's allegedly under siege by terrorists and a guy in a frog costume dancing to EDM music, showing how crazy and scary things are in Portland. It was remarkable. Yeah. And to me, one of the most powerful ways of showing how humor and art can be one of the best mirrors to expose the corruption of a regime.
Yeah, it kind of touches on two really important. This is why it's so important we learn our history and do our reading. I'm finishing that How Fascism Works book by Stanley right now. Yep. You're right. Art always has this big role to play. And also juxtaposing authoritarian violence with an opposition that is very hard to paint as violent or scary. Martin Luther King and the Civil Rights Movement often famously led with children. And there were those famous images of children being bit by dogs. The Russian Revolution really kicked off when a bunch of old ladies marched on soldiers and the soldiers refused to shoot. It is not only great in winning the public argument, but it's also it destroys morale from the folks that are being asked to enforce and commit violence when you're doing so in these clearly terrible ways. And so it is actually, as funny as the frog thing is, and it is funny, it is a tried and true strategy in confronting authoritarianism.
Yeah. I mean, even the term terrorism, which was invented during the French Revolution, terrorism was used to paint a scarlet letter on the political opposition and to punish people. Even that term was knocked down by the French. They became sick of what they saw during the Reign of Terror when I think it was 19 nuns were executed amidst that bloody reign of terror. Like, just like you said, Xander, with children marching and older Americans marching, when more than a dozen nuns were executed, the French people said, what is going on here? What are we doing? Now, we certainly don't want to get to that point in the United States, but that's why something like the frog effort in Portland gets ahead of it getting that bad by saying, oh, really? It's a terrorist operation? Oh, really? Immigrants are destroying this country and committing violence against you? Hi, I'm in an inflatable frog costume. I am the opposition that you're saying is terrifying America. Like, that to me is so powerful and potent.
There's another piece of this. And Miles, you and I are experiencing it through Defiance. Like, this is fun. And if we can make defying Trump fun, it's a lot easier to engage that way. It's a lot easier to dress in a frog suit than it is to dress in black bloc and look scary and confront the opposition and whatnot. That's going to be only a fraction of the population that's willing to do that. We're never going to get to that magical 3.5% if that is the vibe of the opposition. And so it doesn't mean that there shouldn't be a faction like that, but it's much easier to step into it. Because I live in Portland, I've been with the Portland Frog guys recently, and one of them took their daughter to an ICE protest. So think about that 16-year-old going to the ICE protest, and she left and said, Dad, that was so fun. Can you imagine? There's no other scenario other than being in that suit for this young lady where she would have walked away saying, that's so fun. It might have been scary, might have been empowering, but not fun. And fun is something you'll come back to. And so we need to keep nurturing movements like this and embracing that strategy.
Yeah, and it makes it more infectious. I mean, it's so easy to get into a headspace of fear about this administration and what's happening. And it is dark times right now. But if we create a cultural moment where it's fun and inspiring to go push back, that spreads so much faster than telling someone you have to do this, otherwise you'll lose your country. That's scary. Like, going into it from a position of fear isn't what inspires people to get out onto the streets. They need to know it. We need to know what the stakes are. Yes, the stakes are the survival of our republic, but it doesn't have to be doom and gloom to go save this country. In fact, I said to you, one of the turning points for me this year was realizing what an honor it was to get to go do this. I'd rather we're not in this moment. I'd rather we not have to be doing this, but it is a privilege to try to go get to protect this country and democratic institutions, and something that we get to tell the next generation we did. Like, that's a privilege.
100%. We're going to get older, hopefully. I mean, I guess it depends how this shakes out, but when we get older, if we do, people are going to ask, where were you and what did you do in these moments? And I consistently want to be able to say, I tried to be on the right side of history. It doesn't mean I'm always going to get it right, but I want to be able to look myself in the mirror and say that, and tell my kids and grandkids that. I want to read you a quote. This is from Sophie Scholl. If you don't know who Sophie Scholl is, she was leader of the White Roses, which was a youth Nazi resistance group in 1943. And she was executed when she was 21. And I'm going to get a little emotional doing this, but I'm going to do my best to get through it. These were her last words. How can we expect righteousness to prevail when there's hardly anyone willing to give himself up individually to a righteous cause? Such a fine sunny day, and I have to go. But what does my death matter if through us thousands of people are awakened and stirred to action? I think about Sophie a lot in these moments, in how I behave, and how we as a movement behave. And I think we're doing that. We are, by being those folks that people can see active in this fight, we can stir the amount of people we need to stir into action.
Yeah. Wow. That was powerful, my friend. If you have the opportunity, I don't know if you're in the chat for folks who are watching on Substack, if you can paste that in there. Otherwise, we'll send that out in our next note. I think that would be fantastic. We have a couple more minutes here just to take a few questions before we log out for the year. Again, reminding you, we will be doing a program at, I don't know, what time on Monday, Xander?
Noon PST, 3 Eastern.
Yeah, noon PST, 3 Eastern on Monday. We'll be doing our last mission briefing of the year, but this is our last regular Defiance Daily. And so we'd love to take a couple of questions here at the end before we sign out. I hope you guys liked the top 5. If you did, please hit the like button. This was, I think, a great way to end the year. I think we've seen a lot of really, really incredible developments. There were a lot of things that didn't make that list. Again, feel free to add into the chat other moments of defiance this year that inspired you so people can have them. But we'd love to take a couple questions here at the end. Liz asked one, how did the two of you meet, Miles and Xander? I'm glad you asked that question, Liz. Xander can fill in the gaps. The short version is actually we were connected through an unlikely person, Andrew Yang of all people. Andrew Yang, who some of you love and some of you hate, and is this remarkable public figure. Andrew ran for president in the Democratic Party a couple of years back and knew both of us from different things. And at one point, I think while I was working on some stuff to try to prevent Trump from coming back to power, he said, "Hey, you guys should connect. You've both been active in this space." But Xander might remember it differently.
No, it was exactly that. It kind of makes sense that the Republican and the Democrat were connected by the third party guy. It was like a very, very appropriate connector for us.
Yeah, there's like a guy walked into a bar joke somewhere in there. Yeah.
But I actually think Yang put you on the phone with me because he was vetting if I was the right person to run this think tank that he had been thinking about. And by the end of the phone call, we were co-founders.
What's so funny about that is I remember we talked for 2 hours and we got to the end of it and we were like, oh shit, we didn't even talk about the thing that Yang wanted us to talk about. We just talked about like differing ideological views and philosophical views and kind of like debating, which was a lot of fun. But I knew instantly after that, I was like, oh, we're going to work on something together. And what's funny about it is, we worked on a public policy effort, a think tank, which sounds very dry to people. Think tank stuff is kind of dry, but we both knew that working to combat autocracy was the thing we should collaborate on. That was the thing we both felt like, we knew that moment wasn't over. Trump had already left office when you and I connected, but we knew the moment wasn't over and that there were scary things to come and that we were going to team up on that at some point. And so, after this year, I mean, look, you were one of the first phone calls I got after we were hit with that executive order. And you were one of the first people in my life who said, I got your back no matter what. I mean, I hope you don't mind me telling people this, Xander, but I mean, you called me and said, if you guys can't afford to pay your bills, like if you can't afford to pay your mortgage, I got you. That rocked me, man, in a good way, because we had so many, people that were terrified and running from us. And to get that phone call from you and have you say, hey, man, I know that you have lost your job, your business is blowing up. Like, I'm happy to take on those bills if you need me to. I will never, ever, ever, ever forget that. And I want people who are watching to know, because it is phone calls like that that create a defiance in this country, is people like Xander Schultz willing to say, I'll be there no matter what. That's how you know you got a friend who's ride or die.
Right on. Yeah, they don't get to win. We're going to win at the end of this thing. So they don't get to win, man. It's awesome working with you on this. I'll say, man, I was, now that we're talking about this, I don't know if this is what people are interested in. Working with you restored my faith that the other side of the political spectrum, not the Y authoritarian axis, but the X axis, we're good faith actors. We were talking, I think on a Wednesday briefing, we were talking about Obamacare. And you're like, I think Obamacare has been a disaster, and I think I know where you sit, Xander. And I think the thing that has defanged those types of conversations between us is I know your heart, and I know peers like you in your heart. When you say that, you don't mean, I think poor people should die, which is, if you're in the progressive circle, that's what it can sound like. And it means you have a thesis around how to distribute care and get people better care. That is not rooted in that solution, which I was an advocate.
But that might be rooted in another solution because we agree on the end goal.
But it's why we kind of missed that part of the conversation in American politics. Social media definitely missed that part of the conversation. Like, what's the end goal? And I think when you get in relationship with people across the aisle, you do realize that the end goal is either shared or at least resonates and you can understand it. And so you were the beginning of, at the time I was the largest funder of Black-led community organizing in the country through Defeat by Tweet. All my friends were like radical socialist Black leaders and whatnot. And so I didn't have a lot of friends like you at that point in time.
Well, and people don't know about this, by the way, Xander. I mean, they don't, a lot of our folks in our community don't know. I mean, you were leading the King Foundation for a while. Like, I mean, Martin Luther King Jr.'s family foundation, and that legacy. I mean, you were doing so much of that work on the front lines.
Yeah. But man, this friendship's really meant a lot to me. And I think, as I've studied more of that history, going back to King and when he was leading the Poor People's Movement at the end of his life, when Fred Hampton started building the Rainbow Coalition, you actually do have these moments in U.S. history where people realize there's a broader set of shared desires and principles, and we need to build these bigger coalitions to go realize them. And I think we're stepping into one of those moments, and I think our friendship and hopefully what we can build together is in service to that.
I think that's the place for us to leave it, my friend, because that's such a good note to go out on. Is honestly, we didn't plan that, but these types of connections are what makes this all work. I mean, the affinity you feel towards your friends, your family members, your community, your desire to protect them is what's going to get us there. You don't have to desire to protect me or Xander. Protect the people closest to you who might be victims of these abuses of power, people who are immigrants in your community who came here because they thought this was the most remarkable country on the face of the globe, people who are being persecuted in your town because of their political views, people who might be in the crosshairs of an administration who is saying they're going to go after anti-capitalist people who don't hold traditional values. That's literally what's written in the DOJ memo to expand their domestic terrorist campaign, is they're going to go after people who don't hold traditional views of morality. That is not what this country is. Protect the people you care about from that happening. And if you do that, then this movement does spread across the whole nation because we all have people that we care about and we want to protect. So I'll just say from my end, before flipping it to you to close this out, Xander, so proud to be a part of this community. So inspired by what members of defiance.org and our broader group of supporters have done to allow us to be in this fight, to allow us to expand what we're doing. And I will say, going into next year, I mean, you and I both spent a good chunk of today talking about things that we've got planned for the early new year. I feel more energy than ever. And I know that you all will have a life-changing opportunity to protect this country, to save the broader American experiment when we go into 2026. So thank you for making all of that possible from the bottom of my heart and from my family, who you all have stood by and helped protect. Thank you. Xander?
Yeah, well, let's go write a great story together. We're writing it now, and it's going to be big and beautiful, and it is going to be better and more impactful the more feedback we get from you guys. Really, Miles and I feel like we're custodians of this, not the kind of folks just in charge. And so our monthly meetings matter. We're going to keep creating more opportunities for you all to come here and us to listen. We must grow. We have to grow. Safety is in numbers. Effectiveness is in numbers. We have to. And that doesn't come from Miles and I doing this podcast. It comes from you all leaning in, seeing yourselves as co-owners of this thing and growing it. And you've done a tremendous job thus far. And yeah, please keep the communication going with us. And we're going to do our best to build what needs to be built.
All right, rock and roll friends. This has been a closeout episode of Defiance Daily Dispatches for the Defiant. As we always say, stay loud, stay brave, and stay together. Thank you.